Did you see, Nick, the death of Sora? Did you catch this
Yes.
news article?
And I thought it
So
was awesome.
you danced on the grave of Sora, dude. How dare you? How dare you do this? So just for those of you who don't know, basically, okay. So I wasn't aware of this deal actually, but Disney, I think it was $1 billion deal between OpenAI and Disney that you were supposed to be able to create yourself with lightsabers and Disney characters in universe and stuff like that. But eventually, what's happened? So they've killed Sora, they've ditched Disney, they've declared code red on Anthropic, and OpenAI are hiring 3,500 people and are expected to lose $14 billion. So they are allegedly both panicking and sprinting at the same time. So just a bit of context on the Sora thing. Let's go into some reactions here. So if you remember this, now this is going to blow your mind. When do you think Sora was released? Do you remember?
Like it feels like at least a year ago.
6 months ago.
Oof.
That's
it.
If you'd asked me, I would have, was that like 2018 or something? No, like 6 months ago. Sora was released 6 months ago. It hit first on App Store. Forbes estimated it was costing $15 million a day, about $5 billion a year. And a lot of interesting metrics on it. But the point is, like, the deals with Disney, and now they're actually shutting it down, which I think is really fascinating.
Wow. Brutal. I mean, like, the writing was on the wall for something like that for a while. Anthropic made the bet a few years back that text was enough of a universal interface that they could use that to get to self-reinforcing AGI. And they like went all in on that. And they're like, screw anything else. They didn't even have like a transcribe mode or like a voice mode until pretty recently. And as you know, it's still pretty shit. So all they really care about is like, can we get a bunch of tokens together in like the specific, like text tokens to the point where it can reason and do cool things. And they went all in on programming. And, I think this is the result. They're so much further ahead because the programming allows self-reinforcement stuff. OpenAI did a lot of really cool things. I'd say their models, at least statistically, were better at like high, like some mathematics, which is pretty wild to think about. So like high end like theoretical math, for instance, their models have really crushed the Opus series of models on like these advanced theoretical calculations and stuff like that. But because those aren't directly applicable to the improving the main thing, they haven't gotten the feedback loop. Likewise with Google and like their multimodal push. I mean, Google's a massive sleeping giant still, and I'm sure if they put everything they had into it, maybe they could make it up. But my take on it is like, Anthropic just went super narrow, and they just like made a really strong bet, and I think their bet is more likely to be right. And now all of the other players that diversified their resources into video and audio and so on and so forth are just reeling from the impacts.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. I think OpenAI is the king of side quests, right? It's like the plain GTA. Anthropic's been progressing the storyline, and OpenAI is like doing little side quests. It's doing taxi rides. It's doing all sorts of crazy stuff. But I think its strategy probably now, obviously, we know it doesn't work. But probably 2 years ago, when ChatGPT 3 landed and it was blowing up, or GPT 4. When we were thinking of use cases for AI, we weren't, obviously, make.com anytime, I get that, but we weren't really thinking of coding as much. I think back then, I think that was a bold bet, to be honest with you, that I don't think people never really expected non-coders to be able to build apps. I think that became like, I think 3 years ago, you wouldn't really have said that. So that was a strong bet. You were probably thinking about video generation, music generation, audio generation. So I think probably 3 years ago, most people would have said that was a sounder bet. But obviously going narrow on code gen, you would have thought that that was very niche. Isn't it so interesting that that's actually probably the highest growth market you could possibly get on? If you think about the second order effect of you basically democratize software, if you crack it.
I think there were many ways that could have gone wrong, but I think Dario Modi was just like, well, what are our AI models really? And it's like, well, like, they're like big mathematical equations, but like they're scaffolded by a bunch of code. So can like we just like improve the scaffold of the code such that even if the capability of the model isn't as good, we could just build it really fast and then make it better and better and better. And so I think that was really his play. And that's why the coding harness, like, Cloud Code has just crushed every other coding harness. Because that was literally what they've been focusing on for the last, half a decade, basically. And I bet you this is part of like the reason why he left OpenAI to begin with. Because if you didn't know, Dario and I used to work at OpenAI. He was one of the early guys that like, I guess had some fundamental disagreements with it. And he's like, screw it. I'll do it better myself. And then he left and founded Anthropic. But yeah,
wow,
pretty neat, huh?
I wonder how closely entwined the code generation is with the text generation. Like, a new era or a new kind of like cliff face in development for the language also dramatically improve the coding? Like, I just wonder how distinctive those two application use cases are, because they're both the best right now for text. Anthropic
Yeah.
wins on code, and it also wins on text generation. So I wonder if that's just the fact that they've pioneered two separate lanes, or there is some underlying similarity in the way that both of those things happen. And it's a super technical question, but I'd be really curious to know that, because if you're OpenAI now as well, what do you do strategically? Where do you index into? Because I think we're at the point where the models do need a USP. They do need something. And I also wonder if it's kind of like the PlayStation era where, like, you know, like initially in the 90s, like every controller looked different and you had to freaking do this to use a freaking remember the Xbox controller, you had to freaking do this or something crazy. I do wonder if they're all going to converge on the same sort of performance, but then it's more the ethics and the rules and the personality that's the key differentiator. So the question for OpenAI is, what's your thing? Like, what's your core focus going to be?
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I mean, if I were OpenAI, I would leverage my new Department of War contract, and I would do whatever is in my power to stop those Anthropic data centers. Because if they don't, I don't think there's any
declare war
cash.
on Anthropic data centers.
Department of War, declare war. They're so damn far ahead, and I don't want to give anybody any ideas. I'm sure the world in the future is going to be rife with that sort of like anti-AI sentiment, bombing data centers and whatnot. But
Well, dude, on that point, so let's just double click on this. And so OpenAI declared Code Red. Claude Code launched to public in May 2025. Wow, that feels like that was a long time ago, but that was like yesterday, basically. Within 9 months, $2.5 billion in annualized revenue. Fastest product ramp in enterprise software history. 4% of all GitHub commits worldwide are now authored by Claude Code. That is outrageous. Anthropic's total ARR exploded from $1 billion at the end of 2024 to $9 billion at the end of 2025. 3 months later, it's $19 billion. So they've gained $9 billion in annually recurring revenue in 3 months. Meanwhile, ramp expense data shows Anthropic's share of business AI invoices climbed from 10% to 60% in 1 year, and OpenAI, his share has fallen from 90% to 35%. So
holy,
yeah. When you actually get the data, it's
that's terrifying. I didn't realize it was that bad.
No, and then the consumer app thing, the whole mass, we're all boycotting OpenAI with the Department of War situation.
Insane. I mean, like the stack, the not coincidences, but every factor is like multiplicative, right? Like that factor is multiplicative on obviously their lost like market share just because their models are maybe a little more sycophantic, and the whole GPT-4o scandal. You really like looking back, see and piece together why Anthropic's been crushing.
Yeah, with the 3-punch combination. Yeah, it's fascinating. I think OpenAI needs to do one thing extremely well now, and make a bet. Yeah, because I don't think loyalty is a really big thing in the AI space. I think people will just use the models that are better.